in the workplace, I often found that that wasn't the most effective way, mostly because there are a lot of times you want to get in discussion and there's a difference of opinion. And if you're constantly voicing your opinion, it gets overdone. I
Yeah.
think you have to pick your moments. And also, it wasn't allowing me to listen enough. I
Mm.
was constantly talking. And I think that didn't prove to be valuable. And I would even say there's moments now in my older years of my career, I'm still young, but still in the more mature years of my career where I still find myself that default.
Three things you will learn from this episode. Number one, how to build and scale brands that last. Number two, some critical approaches to hiring and retaining great talent. Number three, the power of creating loyal and engaged brand communities. Welcome to this episode of the Heartbeat for Hire podcast. I feature Olympians, CEOs, disruptors, authors, professional athletes, and the best of the best, where they share their stories of resilience with my lens on leadership and culture. Let's get started. What do you get when you combine a tech consultant turned sports management guru who's also a collegiate athlete who helped restore Title IX rights at UMass with a deep passion for health and wellness? You get Pamela Levine, former CEO of Manduka and a force in building community-driven brands. With over 25 years of leadership in the health and wellness space, Pam's career spans from scaling multi-million dollar sports brands like Saucony and Quiksilver to leading the charge in restoring Title IX rights at UMass. And she is a very longtime friend of mine. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Lyndsay, who would have thought when we were, how old were we? Eight,
Eight,
9, 10,
8
here
years
we
old.
are.
Yeah, I mean, camp friends. Woohoo! It's the best. So
Exactly.
shout out Vega Sisters. So I start every show the same way, and I always like to ask my guests to share a little bit of your story, and your story is pretty incredible. So would you be so kind as to share some of your journey?
Yeah, thank you. Lyndsay, first off, it's such an honor to be here. You're amazing as well. And so I think
Friend.
just like attracts like, and I think that's
Totally.
probably, you know, I've been blessed with that in my life. And I think that's really defined my journey since I've been young. It's really been defined by the people I've connected with, and I've been lucky enough to have amazing mentors in my life. And ultimately, I'm at the part of my career where now it's my job to give back.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, you know that. And I think most of us that have realized the power of, which is why I crave so much people connecting in person when I was young. And it really started, you mentioned UMass. It really started at UMass. I played tennis there and it got cut.
Mm.
And while I was a university student, someone introduced me to a statute called Title IX. I had never heard of it. You're 18, 19 years old, not as well aware. And the coach at the time gave me a business card of a legal firm in DC that had done work with Brown and a few others in terms of Title IX. And 6 months later, I found myself in a discussion with UMass about how they were out of compliance. And to their credit, which is why they remain one of my favorite all time, I always say one of the great loves of my life is UMass Amherst. And yeah, they worked together with me and we reinstated the team as well as three other women's athletic programs and got scholarships and new courts and really revamped those four women's programs. And that set me on a journey that really took my career. They invited me back. I went back to Boston and worked in tech and computers. I was a math and Japanese major. Can you believe that?
No, I can't
And
believe
I mean, I was like,
amazing.
what? People are like, you are a math and Japanese? Yes. As I understand, they go well together. But yeah, so I actually was in Japan finishing my studies on the phone with lawyers at that time. I remember we were faxing back
Yes.
then.
Back in the
And
day.
yeah, I came back to the university in the fall of, I think it was 93, and sat down with the university and we worked it out. And I was on a committee to hire the new coach a few months later. And by January, we were back in business. And I got to know the program. They invited me back and got a master's in sport management, and that remains the top program in the world. And that really, again, set me up. I had my first mentor in Boston I remember his name was Ray Plant. He sat me down. I was working in Charlestown, Massachusetts, and he sat me down. I had come from a tennis match, and he was like, "What are you wearing? You need to be in a suit. This is how we roll." And I think one after another, whether I then worked at Disney, I worked at Saucony, I had great mentors at each location. And I really valued the connection. And I'm a very much a monkey see, monkey do. If I can watch someone inspire me, then I can take on those characteristics. And that's really my language of learning. So very visual learner. And I think for me, that really defined the next 25 years of my career. Yeah.
I love that's such a great place to start. So I'm the same way. I'm a mimic, so I copy what I see. And in your experience, you got to work for a lot of really cool companies and a lot of really cool brands. What were some of the inspiring leadership things that you got to experience in those roles?
If I said his name, he'd kill me. So he always wants to remain anonymous. But there's a gentleman I worked for probably 6 or 7 years. And I think the biggest thing that was one of my early jobs, and he was very stoic at work. Here I am, an athlete. You're used to cheering on. We went to camp. I'm a very
Yeah,
vocal leader.
yeah,
They used to call me coach when I was young. But in the workplace, I often found that that wasn't the most effective way, mostly because there are a lot of times you want to get in discussion and there's a difference of opinion. And if you're constantly voicing your opinion, it gets overdone. I
yeah.
think you have to pick your moments. And also, it wasn't allowing me to listen enough. I was constantly talking. And I think that didn't prove to be valuable. And I would even say there's moments now in my older years of my career. I'm still young, but still in the more mature years of my career where I still find myself that default. So he would always say, do not win the battle, win the war. He was a competitive athlete, so always through that lens. But what he meant was you don't need to win on contact.
Yeah.
Just allow the conversation, the situation to blossom and
Mm.
not overthink the small stuff. And I think that was one major impact.
That
I think the other thing too was just allowing space to breathe. I had a lot of great leaders that didn't react again consistently over time and allowing problems to evolve. I have one great mentor that I worked with most recently at Manduka, and he just would allow us to give space, give time for situations to evolve. And that also proved to be incredibly valuable. You think about whether people are reacting to situations in their lives today or where the country may be going. I think just giving it space is often helpful. So those are two major areas that I think have done me well.
great takeaways. And I think that autonomy, that giving space really does allow people to shine. It allows them to find their voice. And I think the best leaders are really good listeners. And I know for me, it was always really important that I vocalized I was not the smartest in the room. I welcomed other people's opinions. I really could learn from other people's experiences. And I imagine that's a leadership trait that you carried.
A
Um,
1000%. Yeah.
so let's talk a little bit about running a company like Manduka. You've had really high roles in a bunch of different companies. Let's talk about talent because there is, I mean, we're on LinkedIn and I'm on it every day and I see so many job seekers. What did you look for when you were looking for great talent and how did you keep them?
Well, I think if anyone told you they had the exact answer, they'd be lying. I'm
Yeah.
going to be honest. People are complicated, and I think every situation's different. So you can explain your background or explain the company, but until that person gets into that role and is with their peers and has a dynamic, they're either going to shine or they're not. It's like any great sports team. Until they're in the situation, you just don't know how it's going to work out. I think for me, one of the things that always comes into my purview when you hear it over and over as I speak is through sport. And I think more about talent in the aggregate and rather than just one individual. It's so important. I really fly when I have great harmony around me. It's so important to make sure the puzzle pieces fit
Hmm.
rather than have best talent at each role.
Great
So
idea.
I'll often take a player that maybe didn't have an A plus in the exact pedigree we needed for that role. They were talented, but I could see through culture fit that they were going to work incredibly well across their peer group. I find the peer group to be one of the most important value adds for an organization because if that peer group is working well, they can motivate each other to make
Yes.
drastic changes.
Yes.
Yes, they can get along with their boss. They may two levels up also manage. But when they feel supported at their rank, that's, I don't know, Lyndsay, for you, but that's what I found to be one
Yeah.
of the most effective.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like when you can make people be interested in each other, they're far more likely to collaborate, communicate, share best practices, share opportunities. That's a common thread that I always found when I was leading teams and really trying to build those teams. And I think your takeaway on um, finding the right ingredients for the team is really important. If you have two really vocal people, sometimes they'll end up at odds. And so you kind of have to balance like who's vocal and how is that going to be a compliment to these people. And having that consideration also means that you are taking the time to get to know the people on your team. Because if you don't know them, you're not going to make those choices the same way, right?
Yeah. And one of the, I don't know if it's a saying that I've adopted, but one of the things I always say, and I've seen it over and over, is when my team from the inside out is humming, we do great work with the brand. Our numbers are up, our profitability's up. Why? Because we're spending time on the outside, on our competition, the market dynamics, consumer behavior. We're not spending much time on interpersonal challenges internally. So I have hired the mistakes I've hired quick. I've hired A plus talent that everyone else loved, but I instinctually
No, it wasn't
something
right.
left, it didn't feel right, didn't move fast enough on making changes. That's one thing that maybe I've gotten flack for in my older years, but has always proved right is when I see something's not working, we communicate, we talk, we try to find ways. But ultimately, if there's not a fit, it is better for me to get them in a better place and for our team to move on. And so that's been something that I've learned over the years. But ultimately, an inside out strategy. When the team is working well, often my brands are doing exceptionally well.
Mm.
Yep.
You touched on the word culture a little while ago, and I'd love to understand from your perspective how important was having healthy culture? What was the role that that played in the brands that you were building?
Yeah, I mean, everyone asks me, and it's just, again, not to beat this drum, but a hard open athlete is definitely the culture that fits me and fits my teams. Why? I'm a hard worker and I also love to have fun and have some balance. So an athlete will come in, they'll do their work, they'll put in the effort, and also when they're heart open, meaning they're willing to risk and be vulnerable. And I think our team needs to feel each other and to make sure we feel safe. And you only do that when you're not coming in with a shell protected.
Hmm.
And I often find in the executive, I worked in the yoga space, so I was allowed to talk about heart open and sharing. And it was a very safe place because our culture and our consumer wanted to hear that from us. I really crave sitting on executive boards, on executive teams now, allowing myself to be vulnerable in front of others to allow the team to meet me there because I really believe it is our job in capitalism, commerce, call it what you want, to be human. And we are not selling to bots, we are selling to humans. And it's so important that the culture feels human and that's different for every brand. It really fits the brand and what the pace of the consumer is. Our culture kind of needs to match that.
I totally agree. So, obviously, you were in the wellness space, so it's an open space where people can naturally
Exactly.
be more intuitive, naturally be more centered, use more woo words that maybe aren't used in tech as much. But
Uh-huh.
do you think I'm really curious about this. Do you think there's been a shift in the way we're running our businesses now, where some of that is more welcomed at the top outside of the health and wellness space?
Good question. I would say yes and no. When you look at the S&P or NASDAQ, could I sit there and say if I sat at those executive tables, would I sense this hard open connective culture? If you're a tech brand, you are driving technology.
Yeah,
And often I wonder if there's conversations about the human or about enabling the tech. And when you're enabling tech, you probably are not
yeah,
connecting as much to the human voice, right? So I've been lucky enough and I'm more passionate about consumer brands because that fits me
yeah.
better. I can talk about humans and their emotions and how they're feeling. So I would say yes and no, depending on the
Yeah,
brand,
I think
not
that's
to
a great
skirt that,
answer. No, no, I
not to
think
plead the fifth,
it's
but
a great
yeah.
answer, and I think you can't blanket anybody. I mean, like I was in
Hmm.
tech, but I also worked for leaders who inspired by talking about, a sports play last night and I didn't
Yeah.
watch the game and I'm like "Ugh," right over my head. Or, you had those that are, I see you and tell us what you just did because we can learn from you. And, there's different approaches in every space. So I get that.
And
So
by the
yeah,
way, kudos to those brands because those brands are doing exceptionally well. It's not necessarily one, but for me and my style, it's really important that and I say this to people, you talk about career.
yeah.
My career was not linear. It was grad school. It was over here. I was working at Disney, making nothing and working at Macaroni Grill at night, and then back over here. I my success isn't linear, my path isn't linear. And what it really took is to understand where I am most powerful and ultimately the cultures that fit me best. And so that does cut off some opportunities for me, but I have to be true to my voice.
Well,
Yep.
thank you for sharing that because I think a lot of people are given kind of a path that somebody else traveled and said, this is the acceptable way to grow. And I, like you, mine was much more zigzaggy than, and I did this job and I got this promotion and I did this job and I got this. I was not that inchworm kind of look. I was kind of, I'm going to go do a first of a kind business over here. And then I'm going to do that for 2.5 to 3 years. And I'm going to go do a different one over here. And they build on each other. But it was definitely not a straight line. So for other rising executives, for people that are trying to figure out their path, what advice do you give them for figuring out what their true self is and where they're best suited? Because a lot of people struggle with this.
Yeah. And I would say when I was young, and I'm talking, I mean, I'm saying sub 40, maybe even sub 45 for me, not that long ago. I often sometimes took jobs because they served a point in my career. They probably didn't emotionally fit and I
Yeah.
wasn't overly happy, but they did add a skill set I
Yeah.
needed. And so I think sometimes I take jobs in my past where I needed that skill set. And that's okay. I think when I'm older now, I can say what speaks to me because I have this breath.
Yes.
And so when I'm younger, I always say, you shouldn't always love your job.
Mhm.
If you do, you're the 1-2% mazel tov. But if you are not, welcome to the rest of us. And it builds. You just have to make sure you're grabbing something from that situation. As I've gotten older, as we all do, time it feels more precious. And so we also say, I don't need to go into something that doesn't feel right.
Right.
And as I'm older, I say it's okay to say no.
Mhm.
That's the other thing is I think as people we're getting older, we say, oh, we should take an opportunity. I think it's so important to really listen to your heart and gut instinct when you get older because that those days of just saying yes, I think will take a bigger toll as you get older and you
Yeah,
can have more impact.
the earning the skill set, learning the skill set that you need, those are fundamentals. And to the younger listeners, you know, I think Pam has a really great point of you don't have to love your job for the early years. You're learning. You're getting those notches on your belt that are just showing like, okay, I can do hard things. I now have a different skill set that I can apply to this next role. So yeah, I think that's a really important reminder. So let's talk about scaling brands because you've worked with all these consumer brands and some more recognizable than others. What were some of the key things that you did as a leader to really kind of help the brands grow?
You know, I started when I talk about those mentors, I was in marketing and I remember one of my mentors said, "You be better in sales."
Mm.
I thought, well, I'm not selling. I would never sell a used car. I mean, it just felt so foreign to me. When I started getting sales, I realized, as most of us do, it is just about relationships. Even in this tech-driven world, it is about who you trust and who you connect with. I can't imagine a world it won't. So when you're selling something, I think for me, I went into sales. And so for me, revenue growth is my DNA. So scaling brands has always been about driving revenue. Well, ultimately, driving revenue has been about relationships. And whether that's for me in the consumer brands on the wholesale side or on the direct to consumer side. And the direct to consumer side is really interesting because most of us that have more than 15 years career had a wholesale business, and many new people come in directly through direct to consumer. And what I find, which is so important in scaling brands, is again, you are selling to consumers. They want and they smell humanity. They want to know who's behind the curtain, and they will recommend to their friends, which ultimately comes the fastest way to growth. And ultimately, that has been my calling card, whether it's customers that have recommended my brand or team to others, staff on the floor that have recommended. We used to have these things called Saucony Saturdays where we would go and work with the staff, and my sales teams would work with the staff. And those were about getting your staff to recommend. Or in consumer world, where you're taking a new consumer and you're moving them to a casual, moving them to a loyalist, and then moving them to a cheerleader. And that cycle is ultimately what gets brands on fire. And so today, whether it's, 3 years ago was the influencer market, or I'll say, I think a dated way is paid media, but all of those are fine. But ultimately, it's about the human and recommending Manduka. Manduka is a great example where if you go to a yoga studio and you ask a yoga teacher, "Oh, you work for Manduka? I love Manduka." I always tell my class, I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. And when we were younger, we scaled that brand. We had, great, 30% CAGR over 5 years. And that was all from recommendations. Great product plus great consumer endorsement is ultimately, you go to Amazon, that 5-star review, there's humans behind those 5-star reviews, hopefully. But for most of us, there are. And yeah, and that's ultimately to me what's been about scale. So I don't think there's a shortcut. As always, it's brick by brick. Anyone says there's a shortcut will have a very quick ending because it won't be lasting.
Mm-mm. How much of the scaling to a larger, more profitable brand, how much of that was attributed to taking care of your people?
I mean, yeah, it's the only way. It's one, two, and three. In fact, I was just working on something for my portfolio, and someone reflected, "God, you talk a lot about people." And is it not the only thing? People
Well,
inside, people
surprisingly, it's
outside.
not. I mean, everyone on my show knows that it is, but I always try and reinforce because there are still people, and I saw this at IBM. As soon as they let the bean counters run the asylum, we lost our soul. And it
Yeah.
was a heartbreak. I mean, you had these people who deeply cared about each other. There was incredible connections. We looked forward to seeing each other. We couldn't wait to work together. We hired each other. We built teams around each other. And then as soon as they took that away, we struggled a bit. Um,
At Manduka, when I talk about that first wave of growth that we experienced, which was pretty phenomenal, we had the best sales team. I would go into any brand in any world, take that. It was probably like a 15-person sales team inside out. We had the best inside sales team. We had the best outside sales force. We had amazing customer service. Customer service is part of it. And we walked in and whether it was for a big customer, small customer, yoga studio, or an end consumer, we loved our product and we loved our customers, and it showed. And
Mhm.
they came along for the ride and we did them right. And so I think that also just feels good, but also scaled that brand. It was
Yeah,
really amazing.
I
And they
love
were part
that.
of it. Yeah.
I love that. All right, hold that thought. We're going to take a 30-second break and then we're going to come back for more questions. If you like the stories you hear every week on this show, guess what? I have hundreds more from my nearly 30 years in the leadership trenches. And I don't just talk about building irresistible culture, I do it. You can bring me into Keynote, moderate your panels, or work directly with your leaders to drive material change. So let's roll up our sleeves, go out to heartbeatforhire.com, let's connect, and let's make some magic happen. Go lead with heart. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Pam, what inspires you?
Love. Is
Hmm.
that okay to say?
Of course, it's okay to say. It's my
Yeah,
show.
love. I mean, I love being around people where I feel a sense of loyalty and love and connection.
Mm.
That really is what inspires me. Intelligence. I really value, I get very inspired by people that are smarter than me. I love, love, love working for people that are smarter than me. And when I say smarter, they might have a sense of experience
Sure.
that I don't have. They also might have a different personality from me that's very stoic and a little bit more quiet in it. That contrast really intrigues me. I am not, as I mentioned, I'm a math major, not a history buff. I love people that have history and have this sense of perspective. I really get inspired. So I would probably say love, connection, and intelligence are probably mine. Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. Now,
Yeah.
Pam's being very calm and grounded, but let me tell you, the girl can sing a camp song like nobody's business. So don't let this like very calm demeanor fool you. She's a lot of fun. And she's still fun right now. So, what would you like your legacy to be?
It's funny because I talk a lot about at this point in my life, and I haven't figured out exactly what it looks like, but I really want to plant trees for other people to sit on. I've been from Title IX up to, I just recently this summer lost my dad,
So sad.
and he created such a tree for myself and my family. And that's how I've been taught. And so I think for me, to find that place. I'm starting to do some work with UMass and the alumni there because that's where management program has created such incredible alumni. How do I create a tree for them and for those that are coming behind me? So
Mm,
I think when I think about legacy, I think less about maybe my personal self, but
mm,
have I planted enough trees and created enough shade so
mm.
that people wouldn't even know who planted it, but I know it's there. That to
Good.
me is what legacy feels like.
Oh, love that. Beautiful, beautiful. And what's next for you?
I I'm excited. I don't exactly know what it looks and feels like. I'm talking to a lot of people. I think there's a big range of my career and there's a lot of experience. Like I said, it's not linear, and that provides a beauty that I have and an advantage that I have. And so how I put that to use, I'm doing work with a few different brands right now, but ultimately for me, one voice, one vision is really how I work. And so finding that right place to go back and lead
Mm,
is really ultimately probably where I'll land. But in the meantime, providing and starting to get the ball rolling, do I open up my own firm of private equity? That was something I talked about 5 years ago, but I think ultimately leading a brand will end up where I'd be, where I will end up. But it's not going to be without a lot of different support and many different ways, like I said, to plant those trees.
mm. Yeah, I can't wait to see
Yeah.
what you do next. And I am
Thank you.
so proud of you that you're taking this time to really take stock and figure out what feels right, what is going to be the most impactful thing that you can do. And um, I love that you're dipping your toe in a lot of different ponds. So, how can people find you? And if they want to work with you, what should they do?
Yeah, I am on LinkedIn. So Pamela Levine, you'll see, you look up Pamela Levine Manduka, that'll bring me up easily. I'm on social media, not on Facebook. I tend to keep my social media. I'm one of those old school people that's more personal, and
Mhm.
LinkedIn is more professional. So LinkedIn is the best place to find me. Reach out, message me. I really, like I mentioned, obviously, I love to connect. So don't hesitate. And yeah, you never know what we'll be doing together.
Well, tell everybody that you heard her here. Connect with Pam. She's fantastic. She will make your life better. And Pam, this has been so much fun. I've loved having you here. Thank you for sharing all of your wisdom with us.
I love, honestly, Lyndsay, it's been great. And I'm so impressed and inspired by you. Honestly, your leadership and really your confidence in what you've been doing. I've talked to you about this. It's really been a source of light for me and so many others. And so I'm just honored to have a conversation and be connected. And like I said, you never know what 8-year-old friends became. And here we are.
Oh,
So yeah,
oh, so cool. Well, everyone, sit tight. We've got an audience question coming right up. But Pam, this has been such a joy. Thank you so much for being on the show.
thank you as well.
I love today's audience question. It's how can I infuse more heart into my management style if I never have before? This is a pretty common thing. I mean, we were taught as leaders, if you came up when I did, you know, leaders are tough. You're demanding, you want people to hit their numbers or accomplish their goals or whatever it is they need to do. And adding heart wasn't ever really part of the equation. So here's a simple thing you can do as a leader to help change the paradigm. One thing I always say is you are responsible to your people. So, when you're responsible to your people, you need to check in with them. So, this whole idea of annual review one time a year, no, that is not acceptable. Your brain can only retain the last 6 weeks of information. So, if you're not doing an annual review until the end of the year, your end of your fiscal year, something that happened 6 months ago that was really fantastic, you have completely forgotten. So, first, we want to make sure you're incorporating regular check ins, regular reviews with your team. And the question that I'm going to encourage you to ask, this is a humbling question and it's hard. And I've talked about it a lot on the show, so it might be redundant if you've been a loyal listener. But the question is, how can I be the best manager for you or the best leader for you? That question means you don't know everything, but nobody does. And so when you take the time to ask that question, you're going to get widely different answers from everyone you ask. So you listen, and if somebody says, I'm really not sure why I'm in this job. Maybe they moved over from a different department. Maybe it was a reorg, or maybe they just are trying to figure out how to get better at the job that they're doing. You are there to support them, and you are there to guide them and lead them and knock down doors when they need them knocked down. So you have to take that time to listen, and please write down whatever it is they say. And for bonus points, put it in your phone. So if they're giving you their partner's names, their children's names, their pets' names, things they like to do, places they like to travel, you have that at the ready. And so if you know you're going to have this conversation, check it first, and don't call their partner Sam if their partner is Sally. There's really simple ways to stay connected, show you care, show that you're listening, but start with that question. It is a game changer, and make sure you're having those regular check-ins. It's so important as a leader. I hope that helps. Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, go out, subscribe to the YouTube channel, tell your friends, leave a 5-star review. These reviews are what help us get sponsors. They're what help me grow the show. As you know, we got an award this year. It's been a really tremendous ride, and your support means everything. Thank you so much. Have the best day and go lead with heart. Thanks for listening to this episode of Heartbeat for Hire. I hope you enjoyed what you heard. If you did, please subscribe to my YouTube channel or consider leaving a 5-star review and a great rating at Spotify or Apple. Thank you so much for your support. Have a great day.